Protesters disrupted the North Carolina General Assembly's prayer this morning to voice outrage after House Republicans called a surprise vote yesterday to override the governor's budget veto, while most of the Democratic members were absent after they were told by the Republicans that there would be no votes. Protesters gathered to call for the resignation of House Speaker Tim Moore. Democratic State Representative Deb Butler was there. On Twitter, she called for Speaker Moore's resignation with the hashtag I will not yield. I will not yield is the line that made her go viral after she confronted the House Speaker yesterday.
I will not yield.
Touch her. We're not going to let anybody touch her.
I will not yield, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody touch her.
I will not yield.
There is no.
You shall not usurp the process, Mr. Speaker. How dare you subject this body to trickery, deceptive practices, hijacking the process? We have been here day and night for months defending what we believe, and you would submit this body to trickery, deception, deceit. It is so typical of the way you conduct yourself. How dare you, Mr. Speaker?
Deb Butler joined us as a guest here at The Last Word last night, and today, this is what Deb Butler had to say.
North Carolina is better than this.
Yes.
Yes. We deserve better than this.
Yes.
Our citizens deserve representatives with integrity, decency, respect for the rule of law. What happened yesterday was a shameful, shameful display. We will not yield.
We will not yield.
We demand more of our legislators and our elected representatives.
We demand more.
That's right.
And we will see you at the ballot box.
One of the heroes at Deb Butler's side yesterday was Democratic State Representative John Autry. He is the one who had the presence of mind to grab his phone and capture that video of Deb Butler refusing to yield. And he joins us now, Representative John Autry, North Carolina. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. When Deb Butler was here last night, I asked her how it felt as police officers were closing in on her, and then her colleagues, including you, surrounded her, you with the camera, other colleagues we could hear on your video saying, don't let anyone touch her. You all immediately went into a mode of protection so that she could continue. And it didn't seem like there was any real strategy to it. It seemed like it was just a natural impulse that you all felt.
I have to agree with that. It seemed certainly appropriate, and once the Sergeant of Arms motioned for the Capitol Police to be brought in, that's what prompted Representative Candy Smith to say, "Don't let anybody touch her," and then we just all immediately started moving around to encircle her. I had already been shooting with my phone. Because once the Sergeant at Arms approached, I says, okay, this is not going to go down the way they think it's going to go down.
Yeah, and we noticed that you were behind her at first, and then we saw that your camera and you hustle forward, get in front of her, so we ended up getting that more dramatic shot. But when you did that, we could also see the Capitol Police officers coming in behind her. What did you think was going to happen at that point?
I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew she was going to have her say, and she was going to make her points, but they weren't going to be taking her out of that chamber. She's an elected member of that chamber and has the right to be on that floor and to express herself.
What was your own personal reaction when you discovered what had happened?
Well, I was a little suspicious when I first walked in. Usually in these kinds of skeletal sessions, you may have 10 to a dozen members of each party on the floor, but most of the other side of the aisle was in their seats, and that raised my antenna right away. And I recall mumbling to my seatmate that he's going to call that vote. And sure enough, That's when you recognize one of the representatives for a motion. To say that you're going to recognize a member, you don't know what they're going to be rising for. But the speaker was very explicit, would say the chair recognizes Representative Sane for a motion. So I figured this was all planned out ahead, and it really denied over half the population of North Carolina, because last year Democrats in the legislature received 51% of the votes in North Carolina. So they basically denied a little over 5.5 million people their representation by pulling this stunt.
And your camera work was brilliant, and I'm sure there are cinematographers in Hollywood who are saying he captured everything in the room you needed, because you did that shot when Deb Butler challenged the other side, where you panned across to the other side, and we see all of the Republicans sitting there in a completely different mode from the Democrats. There's just a tiny handful of Democrats who were standing around, but all those Republicans are organized, in place. It's like they were showing up for something completely different from why you were there.
I would have to agree with that. We were there to take the pledge and have the opening prayer, probably hear a couple of motions for other ancillary administrative purposes, and then gavel out to be coming back in at 1 o'clock for voting session. This happens a lot in the General Assembly, and we had an opportunity yesterday that it was just, there was no media in the room. Mm-hmm. So I think being able to capture that on the phone to show people what it was like and where it happened and how it happened really was an important piece of the story of the legislative session this year.
The country is very grateful. North Carolina is very grateful. One final point. So the Senate has not voted to override the veto. So what's happening in the Senate?
Well, the Senate has different rules than the House does. And in the Senate, they have to, once the measure is put on the calendar for the Senate, they are given their membership 24-hour notice of when they're going to vote. And the Senate did break the supermajority in that chamber last year during the election also.
So what is the likelihood of the Senate overriding the veto?
I think the likelihood is very strong. They would have to only peel away one Democrat to vote with them. But I think that after the way they exhibited themselves yesterday, we're dealing with a group of people who aren't really concerned about governing. They're concerned with ruling. And that's what they exhibited yesterday.
State Representative John Autry, thank you very much for going to work with that camera yesterday. That told a story the way nothing else could.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for having me on.